So, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to present today results of my research addressing the issue of equality of member states before EU institutions. And this problem is quite closely linked to the principle of rule of law to which the EU subscribes. According to the Commission, referring to the numerous case law of the Court of Justice and European Court of Human Rights, there are 6 core principles that form the rule of law, equality before the law being one of them. And the importance of these principles is underlined by the enshrinement in primary law of the European Union. And undoubtedly, equality must mean not only equality among individuals, but also equality among member states. So that this principle regulates also the legal relation between the EU on one side and member states on the other. And while European Union consistently monitors member states' compliance with the rule of law, it is quite surprising that less attention is paid to whether the EU itself complies with this principle. Member states have ceded part of their sovereignty to the European Union, trusting that EU institutions will treat them fairly and equally. And the key question of my research, therefore, was, are member states truly equal before EU institutions? And the second important question is whether the systemic setup in the EU is such that it prevents and will prevent unequal treatment of member states. Since something that is functional and fair right at this moment may not be functional and right in the future. So thus I won't focus on legal differences arising, for example, from legislation, such as different contributions to EU budget or different level of funding from funds of the European Union. I will also not address the issue of unequal representation in EU institutions, such as, for example, the different ratio of members of parliament. A key question is whether the EU institutions treat all member states according to the same rules. And perhaps, and this is quite surprising, a democratic deficit, an issue that has long been considered a problem in case of the European Union, is of a significant importance here, but from a slightly different perspective than how we usually approach this problem of the European Union. And let's start with European Parliament and equality of member states. And here it's going to be easy. I believe that European Parliament's capacity to treat member states unequally is very limited. Indeed, this institution does not possess the necessary powers that would allow it to treat EU member states differently at all. After all, its original and dominant role of this body in the system of the 3 communities institutions was to supervise the Commission and not member states. So, should any arbitrary or unjustified differences between member states in the area of legislation arise due to the Parliament, these can be easily eliminated by the involvement of the European Commission or the Council, with whom the Parliament participate in the legislative process. So therefore, such differences are highly improbable. So from a legal standpoint, the Parliament has been established in a way that ensures that there is no risk of inequality between member states. However, the situation is different from a political point of view. Certain risks do exist here, and the level will certainly increase in proportion to the extent of discrepancy between the current political representation in the Parliament and of the member state in question. But that's something which is, given the political nature of Parliament, quite natural. So this is solved. Let's go further. And let's deal with European Council and Council of the European Union. European Council also has limited possibilities to treat member states unequally. The only area where this body can realistically and with legal consequences treat member states unequally is in a procedure laid down in Article 7 TU. However, the requirement of unanimous vote of the European Council to determine that there has been a serious and persistent breach by a member state of the values set out in Article 2 TU pretty much eliminates any real risk of unequal treatment. It's a nice safeguard here. But speaking about anonymous voting, we cannot forget about issues related to foreign policy. Respect, and that's my opinion, respect for the equality of states should mean that any exercise of the so-called veto is seen as an exercise of member states' right and not something a priori negative. So what I believe that persuasion should therefore be based on negotiation and not something which resembles blackmail. And I believe that my Hungarian colleagues probably know exactly what I'm talking about. The situation is becoming much more complex in case of Council, since this is an intergovernmental body representing member states with extensive legislative and executive powers. And indeed, this body has the capacity to treat member states differently. Though I don't believe that this is the case in the case of the Article 7 procedure. However, the situation becomes particularly intriguing in terms of the Council's authority over fiscal discipline of member states, as the Council is the body authorized to take decisions in the excessive deficit procedure. And the problem here is that this proceedings represents a political, not a judicial mechanism for enforcing the EU rules. And thus the need to be neutral and impartial is not in the DNA of these proceedings. And historical experience shows that the Council has no problem in exercising this political discretion. A stark example is the Council decision of November 2003, which decided against adopting formal measures contained in the Commission's recommendations in the event of excessive spending by Germany and France. And the practical consequence of this failure of the Council to act was that the rules were not enforced against two countries only because they were Germany and France. So this has happened quite a long time ago, but the rules hasn't changed, so the risk is still persistent here. On the other hand, the paradoxical thing here is that de facto the unequal treatment was executed by member states themselves within the Council. Nevertheless, I still believe that this behavior is clearly attributable to the European Union, since they were acting as an institution of the EU. Even more interesting things gets when we move to European Commission. In case of the Commission, there should in principle be no difference in treatment among member states without a proper objective reason. It's the guardian of the treaties. It's our so-called prosecutor. It should be independent and impartial. So Commission should be a neutral, professional, technocratic apparatus in the institutional structure, which by its very nature cannot discriminate against some member states in favor of others. And that is what it should be. The original configuration developed decades ago, which I consider to be optimal in terms of the objective pursuit, has been unfortunately modified by the recent amendments of the primary law by the Treaty of Lisbon. And to be honest, I consider these changes to be detrimental as they distance the Commission from the original idea. In particular, I find the requirement that the Council proposes a candidate taking into account the elections, the Spitzenkandidat process, problematic, since the Commission somehow loses its neutral status and becomes more connected to Parliament, making it more political rather than a technical or neutral or professional body. Well, and any potential unequal treatment of member states by the Commission is likely to manifest itself in the area of EU law enforcement mechanisms. And this conclusion might be true in all stages. So from the receipt of a complaint or the assessment of whether the Commission will initiate a complaint against the member states through its administrative procedure, or whether to bring an action before the Court of Justice, or whether to enforce earlier decision of the court, which if a member state has not complied with it. And here, Commission possesses significant discretion in determining whether to initiate infringement proceedings under Article 258 TFU. And these actions align with the Commission's original mandate as an autonomous, non-political entity that is professional and therefore unbiased. It's the prosecutor, the guardian. However, a potential challenge arises from the absence of any independent monitoring of the Commission's exercise of discretionary powers. So there is no review process capable of determining whether the Commission is exercising its direction in accordance with the rule of law. And this is quite surprising, since the discretion of the Commission and transparency are not contradictory. On the contrary, they are complementary within the rule of law. And what is noteworthy is that the recent academic literature, as well as all the European Parliament Committee on Petitions position, have both noted that the Commission's enforcement activity is evolving in a rather negative direction. Infringement proceedings are being used less and less and are now a strategic tool for enforcing EU law rather than a tool of day-to-day use. And particularly striking was the apparent relative decline in number of proceedings initiated in the period following the major enlargement in 2004, and this lasted today, since you would expect that the numbers would go the other direction. From a formal legal perspective, the Commission is not in violation of the founding treaties. It has this discretion. However, according to the rule of law rules, potential prioritizing certain proceedings or even member states is or might be problematic and might constitute a violation of this important principle. And unfortunately, which is surprising, we have no exact data here. We have only pure statistic, but not data allowing any deeper analysis. So external control is not possible. And I was primarily referring to the infringement proceedings, but the same conclusion apply or might apply in future in case of conditionality mechanism. Court of Justice is an institution that treats all member states equally and without discrimination, and there is absolutely no doubt about that. It is tasked with ensuring equality between member states or among member states, and this is quite visible at the core of its operations. And Leonard's has identified three direct implications of principle of equality of member states before treaties. It's that it ensures a uniform interpretation and application of EU law. It guarantees such interpretation by a simple Supreme Court, the Court of Justice, and it establishes the primacy of EU law. We can say that Court of Justice has always prioritized the interest of the EU as a whole. And the interpretative argument of ever closer union is clearly evident in its decision making. And the use of this argument somehow implies that member states are completely equal among themselves in their subordination to the EU law and European Union. I believe that the Court of Justice role as the EU's constitutional court is that this institution is key in the ambition to prevent any unequal treatment of member states. So its sole policy is to enforce EU law. It is not politically accountable to anyone. The system is set up to protect judges from member states and other EU institutions. So the Court of Justice is also not in a position to influence law by picking certain cases as the US Supreme Court and by deciding which cases it will hear and which not. And even the system how the judges are selected prevents direct political pressure on its composition. Since we are also dealing with states which fall within the area where the EU might enlarge in future, it seems to me, my impression from its case law is that the Court of Justice applies the EU law uniformly also to all new member states. So these states are bound by all aspects of EU law without exception or implementation of unwritten transitional periods. I have noticed that court's decision-making is perceived as problematic by Polish colleagues. I think Professor Wielec addressed that in his chapter, and I'm referring here in particular to the intervention of this court into the area of Polish judiciary. And here I think that I will slightly disagree with you. I myself do not consider the decision in question to be discriminatory, I would describe them rather as activists, but they are completely in line. They are completely consistent with the court's assertive decision-making practice up to date, which it implemented even against Germany. So I don't think that there is an unequal treatment here as well. So I will come to my conclusion. In the case of Council, there is some evidence of past cases of unequal treatment of member states. However, that was the part of the plan, which is why the relevant competences were conferred on this body. I still think that these competencies were not used in the right way, which would be in line with EU law, as the Council has apparently favored the bigger member states without any objective reason. And it would not have done so in case of other member states. So here the member states are not truly equal de facto. And the equality is not assured since the mechanism hasn't changed. The procedure is still the same. When it comes to Commission, Commission as the guardian of the treaties should by nature treat member states non-discriminatory equally. However, there are certain risks here. As this body becomes more politicized over the year, this assumption might no longer be valid. The changes to primary law risk the body moving from being neutral and technocratic body to being a political decision-making body. As I read in one article written by Professor Kellman, you can't be a prosecutor and a government at once. This has to be separated. And that's what's happening here with the role of European Commission becoming slowly the government of the European Union, but also enforcing the EU law. On the other hand, do we need another body overseeing the Commission? Well, I don't think so, since that's the task for the Parliament. That's the first thing. And I think that it would be fully sufficient if Commission is a bit more transparent of what it does. And I haven't noticed any example of evident discrimination done by the European Commission. But on the other hand, one can see that the Commission pays slightly more attention to some states than the others. So it seems to me, and now I'm referring to potential future changes of primary law, that the Commission is between the choice. It can either be a prosecutor and guardian of the treaties, or the policy maker closely linked to the Parliament. I still love the original idea by Monnet and Schuman better than the current state of affairs. In contrast, the EU has been consistent in its approach to new member states. I haven't noticed anything to suggest that these states have either a privileged or disadvantaged position in the EU vis-à-vis EU institutions. Here I'm aware of the fact that colleagues probably from Romania or Bulgaria might disagree with me, for example, because of Schengen, but that was part of negotiation agreements, so that's not what I was trying to address. Well, and what we have to do is that we have to closely monitor future changes of primary law, especially concerning the relationship between the Commission and Parliament and the powers of both institutions. So should be therefore monitored, since the well-intentioned fight against democratic deficit may apparently backfire somewhere else, and we have statistical data that confirm that the Commission's mission has changed in the last 2 decades. And I was promising the conclusion, but we are not there yet. During my last visit in Slovenia, I have noticed that they sell in their stores domaći rum, inlander rum in Austria, something that is also our common heritage in our region. I don't know if in Hungary, if you have it as well, the locally produced rum, usually not from sugarcane, but from, it used to be said that ours is produced from potatoes, which is not true anymore. But due to our membership in the European Union, the Czech Republic has lost our tuzemský rum, domaći rum, and that was because of the fact that it was not produced from the sugar and it contained additives. Whereas apparently Slovenians and and Austrians are privileged as they could keep this product and still produce it and sell it. So that's a nice example of inequality among member states, but that's not the type of inequality I was trying to address. That's rather a sign that our negotiation team during the accession process was not as successful as yours. Well, thank you for your attention, and I would like to welcome students here among us. I promise that if they come, that I will open a bottle of champagne, so I will. Thank you.